Hello, I'm Howie Shariff, and welcome to another show from You Call This Yoga, an educational nonprofit organization in Raleigh, North Carolina. The intent of this internet TV talk show is to share accessible yoga. What we mean by that is practices of the 8 limbs of yoga, not just the physical part, which is one of the limbs, that are therefore accessible to anyone provided that they're breathing. That is the baseline. And then from there, our guests and myself occasionally will add insights as to how we are sharing our limbs of yoga. We intend to have viewer and listener participation and invite you to call in with your questions or comments to 919 518 9773. You can Skype at Computers 2K Voice, or you can log in on the website that you're at now and join in on the chat box. We're very excited to have a guest today with a deep and broad impact on the practices of yoga. He is a lifelong student and teacher, and therefore we have great perspectives from Dr. Richard Miller. He's based in Marin County in California, but has journeyed around the world sharing his teachings as well as gaining his perspectives. So we'll be bringing Richard on in just a little bit. But as we pause, I'd like you to consider, do you have any questions that you'd like to share with Dr. Miller? Because this is a wonderful opportunity to gain perspectives about I-rest meditation, yoga nidra, and other ways that teachers you might train to reach other people that have physical challenge or have been underserved. Amnon, I think it's ready to release Dr. Miller back to the world. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Howie.
You can see I've had a head start on the day.
Yes, indeed. I'm 3 hours behind you, so you're fully awake and I'm waking up.
Well, yes, I've had a show to be excited about too, plus the activities of daily living, which for me are my most meditative part of the day, even though I'm not officially sitting still. So how do you start your day, since we're bringing up starts of the days? What's a typical morning for you?
Well, interesting you mentioned the word still because I would say I start my day awakening into what I would refer to as this unbreakable stillness that is innate, I think, within all of us, but many people have lost touch with. So I lie in bed and I just feel this deep, innate sense of stillness or being or awareness. And I watch how my body and my mind begin to wake up into the day. The world begins to wake up. And I just pause before I get out of bed, just feeling this unbreakable sense of well being. And then I get up, take it with me into my day. And normally I get a cup of tea and then I do my practice. I do some breathing, some stretching, hatha yoga, and then I sit for meditation. And that's the way I kind of begin my day. So it puts a nice stamp on the very beginning of the day. And then all through the day, I keep coming back to that deep sense of well-being, which again I say is unbreakable in all of us, and carry it with me all day long until I go to sleep at night. And then the last thing I do after I say goodnight to my sweetheart is I come back into that being and I let the body fall back into that well-being. And hopefully that's what we're sleeping in all night long.
So it's almost as if you have your security blanket with you.
You've got it. I call it the deepest inner resource that we could all have, but I'll take security blanket.
Well, it's
It's
like
the
the Peanuts
safety.
character without having to suck your thumb.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that about the start of the day and your practice. And uh, many folks have to wake up and go to the bathroom. So it's hard to have that unbreakable sense when something feels like it might break. So how do you approach that when if someone can't just stay in bed right away? How can we invite a similar experience to what you were just referencing?
Well, it's the main piece in my teaching that I want to convey to people is there's something within us that can't be harmed, can't be hurt, is unbreakable. And the first piece I would say of meditation or yoga that I like to convey to people is to help them get in touch with this deep sense of being. I mean, we all know what it's like just to take a moment's pause where we're just being. And we can take that with us all day long. It doesn't matter what we're doing, whether we're sitting on the toilet, we're having a conversation, we're driving in the car, we're at work in the computer, or just resting for a moment. That it's like the background that is in all of us. So I want to bring that out and help people feel it in the immediacy of the moment. And then they realize, oh my goodness, I can carry this with me all day long. And then the beauty is there comes a moment where they realize it's carrying them all day long.
Hmm. So it becomes essentially woven into the perspective.
Exactly. It's like there's a figure background shift. What's right now for most people in the background, this unbreakable sense of being, shifts into the foreground and permeates every experience we have. And it's such an important piece because so many people, when we're under stress, start to feel disconnected from themselves, disconnected from the world around them. And this helps bring back that sense of deep connection to both self and world, and helps us find a deep sense of meaning, value, and purpose just in our own beingness, independent of what we're doing or what we've been doing.
I can appreciate that. That's how I try to approach my mindful activities in the morning when I'm not revving up yet, though I'm within an activity, whether it be some study or I'm a music student. So I
Mhm.
attempt to just be with where I'm at, which is still quite novice uh,
Well,
in
interesting
that.
you say that. We did a study some years ago with cellists, helping them feel this deep sense of being while they're playing the cello, helping them stay in a very deep, relaxed state, and helping them improve actually their performance and their ability to play the cello. And in a way, there comes a moment where they're no longer playing the cello. The cello, in a way, is playing them.
Yes, and it is about developing that connection, which isn't a natural state. Uh,
It is actually, I defer in a sense that athletes know it. We call it the flow,
hmm,
where there's a moment where they just feel that if they're releasing the football, the catcher, the downline person is going to catch the ball. We all know it. Yoga, we might say, is a set of practices that help us get back in touch with that and that we feel ourselves in the flow all day long.
well, yes, I agree. And yes, that wasn't the exact reference I had. I meant for me, holding a mandolin and moving my fingers up the fretboard while actively strumming with a pick with a certain structure and fluidity is an experience that is still becoming gradually more innate.
Yes, I agree with you. Like it's a learn, it feels like a learned skill, and we put in our 10,000 hours, and then it starts to feel natural. Absolutely. Same thing with meditation. It initially it feels great, and then we go through what you're talking about, that learning phase, and then there's a moment where it just drops in, and we realize meditation is now the way we're living our life. It's not necessarily something we're doing, although we're still doing it and practicing it. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for sharing that capacity because it is still quite a ways from the 10,000 hours, and 10,000 hours properly is or reasonably proper too. So I do have a teacher, uh, but it's about being with other people, and even it's great to meditate or do things meditatively, but it's also how do we bring that meditative element into the world.
Yes.
uh, it's great that you were sharing about starting the day just in that unbreakable capacity and an awareness of that. Uh, I was also wondering then, uh, what do you use to wake up to? because they have the concept of the alarm, which is jarring, and I don't see how that invites observation as opposed to alarm. Any thoughts about that?
Actually, yes. I like to naturally wake up, and my natural wake up time when I'm rested is around 5:30, and then I'll lie there in bed for a half an hour or so, just soaking in that being. But interestingly, when the alarm goes off, say, an alarm is a sound we could say that's unfolding against a background of silence. We know the alarm because of the silence that's behind it. So when we're properly oriented, which is what yoga helps us do, we realize the sound as a pointer to the silence that's behind it, that is actually behind us or within us. So I use sounds, I use different experiences through the five sensory doors all day long to help me remember that background stillness or silence that really permeates all of us. We just get so caught in the foreground activities of the thoughts, the emotions, the different things happening around us. We forget the background stillness or silence. So yoga is really about remembering this that is always present, that we can point to as different things: silence, stillness, awareness, and indeed bringing it foreground into our daily life.
Hmm.
Years ago I was teaching a class, and outside the door, all of a sudden, this fellow starts a chainsaw and starts sawing down a tree right outside the window where I was teaching the class. And I watched everybody kind of startle, as most people would, and I could feel within me this deep quality of stillness. And so I was helping the people in the class stop and feel that stillness or that silence, even while the chainsaw was going. And everybody reported that their whole nervous system began to relax and settle back down. And then, in a way, we were using the sound, which continued throughout the class, as this wonderful reference point to this underlying stillness or silence that's again innate in all of us. So we can use any moment of life to help us remember.
And that's interesting. At times when I'm in locations and I'm having the opportunity to be resting, sitting safely, that I've sought to meditate amongst a plethora of sounds because it's just representative of whatever chatters in our head anyway. And how do we practice our focus?
Well, we all have, as you're saying, this little mini me up here that's constantly talking to us. And I like to tell people, well, put it out in front of you in a chair. And would you consult this for financial advice or relationship advice? And I don't think most people would. And
Ah,
so learning to listen to that little mini me without getting caught in it, and then realizing the mini me is sitting in a vast openness. And as we feel that openness, the mini me begins to actually quiet down and become a better living partner within our life.
right. It has its mini me has his or her place, but it
Yes.
just doesn't have to be front and center.
Well, there's so many references in yoga I found that talk about getting rid of this mini me or killing it, through meditation. And I found and discovered that's not the point. The point is we do have an ego, we do have an I, this mini me. It's coming into right relationship with it. And when we do, it realizes it's never been in the driver's seat, and it starts to calm down. And now it becomes a wonderful resource and not just something that's like crazy inside our head going to us, talking to us all day long.
Yes, it's mini me of different sizes. It is what it comes
Right.
down to.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a wonderful opportunity, to invite our viewers and listeners to think about any questions for Dr. Richard Miller at 919-518-9773. Computers 2K Voice on Skype. Log in on the chat room or the chat box. That's a different scene. But also, we're getting ready for our first Pearl of Wisdom, where we can start to practice some of these non-bending truths, though I misstated the concept that Dr. Miller is sharing. Thank you.
We each contain within us, within various energy centers within our body, core wounds that we've experienced growing up in our family, in our culture, or through personal experiences we've had growing up. We can locate these wounds by using what I call positive statements. One such is, I'm safe with myself. This reveals all the places where we're not safe with ourselves, where we tend to betray or abandon ourselves, where we tend to say yes, for instance, when we mean no. These core statements can help us through the tools we gain in meditation, skillfulness to overcome these wounds, and to really recapture within ourselves an unchanging, unbreakable sense of, say, safety within ourselves, where we always feel a core of well-being and unbreakable peace, no matter our circumstances. Other core statements might be, I'm willing to hear myself. I'm willing to see myself. I'm willing to be heard. I'm willing to be seen. So you might entertain these and look at their opposites, where you're not willing to see yourself or be seen, where you're not willing to hear yourself or be heard. And then take advantage of meditation. It's going to help you heal these wounds and really recapture an inner sense of well-being where under all circumstances you are safe, you are willing to be seen, you are willing to be heard, you are willing to feel a deep peace that cannot be broken no matter your circumstance.
Well, viewers and listeners, can you remember I am safe, I can be seen, I can be heard, and I can feel what is possible in terms of peace? How'd I do? Did I remember reasonably well?
Absolutely.
Well,
Yes.
so that, I believe, in itself is a morning mantra, as you were citing in how we could practice a 30-second affirmation, or even elements of that, or even if we have to get up and go to the bathroom,
Mhm.
wherever we are, can we integrate that 30-second meditation as a start? So
And
that's
and as you're saying, then we're seeing all day long where we might start to deviate and we start to feel out of sorts. And then that statement, that core statement to be safe with ourselves, we come back to what do I need to say in this moment, or what's the action I need to do in this moment that keeps me in my authentic self, in touch with myself, in touch with the world around me. And I know this is not easy because circumstances can be very challenging, and yet this is our challenge as a human being to really feel authentic and feel connected deeply to ourselves.
right. Even just having that moment to do that analysis, even if we're not asking the question fully, it's that check-in. Is this where I want to be under these circumstances?
Yeah, and I work a lot over the years with veterans who've had terrible experiences, post-traumatic stress, and these core statements we use to help them get in touch with this unbreakable aspect within themselves and look at how to heal the wounds that do need to be healed while staying in touch within themselves with this that wasn't wounded, can't be hurt, has never been harmed. And so it's an interesting paradox. We're healing the wounds where we have been wounded or hurt or we've been disconnected, and yet we still feel connected to something within ourselves that hasn't been harmed. And that's why I say it's so important right from the beginning to get in touch with this aspect of ourself that's always whole and healthy and doesn't need to be healing as we address the things within ourselves that do feel broken and do need to be healed.
Hmm. Well, You mentioned some things I'd like to touch base on. First, you said something about getting in touch. So, what website and contact information, if people are looking to reach you and the Institute, would be best for folks to search?
My gateway to my nonprofit through the website is irest, IREST dot US. And through that portal, we have different meditations that we offer for free, information on the trainings, the workshops, the immersions that we offer around the world, and different teachings that we're offering. And I do have a few downloads there where people can look at these meditations that help us first get in touch with this that's unbreakable, and then how do we heal the places which do feel broken within ourselves. So irest.us, and then several books that I've written are on the website, Yoga Nidra, The Meditative Heart of Yoga, and my latest book, which is the IREST program for healing PTSD, and another offering, IREST Meditation, a program for resiliency and well-being.
All right, Amnon, at some point you'll share the book covers with us. And didn't I forward them to you? Not yet? Well, we'll get them to Amnon in just a little bit. Sorry about that. That's my techno lapse. But yes, now let's talk about one of those books and how it is an integral part of a training for level one. Because there's teachers out there who can have a greater impact on our society through learning some of these techniques. Could you explain a little bit more about your book?
Yeah, I wrote the book back in the early 90s as a kind of primer for yogic, I call it yogic meditation. It comes out of the tradition called Yoga Nidra, yoga meaning our connectedness with this unbreakable aspect within ourselves and the world around us, and Nidra meaning, it actually means sleep, but it means a changing state of consciousness. So our ability to feel that unbreakableness no matter what we're experiencing or feeling in the moment. And so the book's a lovely kind of introduction to the teachings, and it comes with a CD with a number of practices on it. And it's one of the underlying primers we use in our trainings, which, as you said, are for people who both want to learn how to teach it, but it's also a deep dive immersion into meditation itself, the underlying principles and structure that people can use to really learn how to move into a meditative way of life during their day, as well as practices to help them establish that sense of meditation.
Excellent. And also, I saw on the website that there was some self-study on there and some online learning, which I thought was rather extensive and rather fascinating. Could you explain that and who?
Yeah, we're trying to create online webinars that people can access, YouTube videos, but also we have an app that people can utilize as a kind of a 14-day challenge. I've got 42 meditations up there that is helping a person incrementally learn our approach to meditation, that are also being utilized by, say, the veterans, women who've been rescued from human trafficking, the homeless, some of the populations we serve. But for just general folks, it's a wonderful, structured, easy way to incrementally integrate meditation into their life. So we're trying to offer through these gateways like online learning so that people around the world can come to meditation in the comfort of their living room or while they're driving around in their car listening to the recordings.
Though meditation while driving could be hazardous to your health. So
Well,
make sure you're in the passenger seat.
We're pragmatic. We realize some people that's their their traveling office, we might say, or their traveling living room. So we try to create talks and meditations so that keep driving safe. Absolutely.
Well, I can appreciate that. It's also how much chatter are we involving even when we're driving, and just driving with focus can be a unique engagement.
You
So,
know, there's an interesting series of studies that were done that show people when they're driving or just relaxing, they tend to go into their default network, what's called the default network, where they tend to go into cycling negative thoughts, thinking about the past, how can I do better in the future, whereas meditation helps us step out of that default kind of negative thinking into what we call the present-centered network, where we become much actually more creative. We access parts of our nervous system that aren't uh, caught or held rigid in our old conditioning and patterns. We break out of them when we are able to access this present-centered network in our nervous system, and we find ourselves much more creative in our thinking. And this mini me in our brain starts to calm down. We feel more at peace, more relaxed, and able to meet the moment, whatever it's bringing to our table. So uh, I like to think of meditation actually while we're learning to practice it in 10 or 15 or 20 or 30-minute gulps. It's many practices all day long, tiny little 30-second, 20-second. So as we're driving, eating, walking, talking, working, we're putting it into our daily life container all day long.
well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Coming from a more physically compromised state where I'm living a physically meditative lifestyle where I'm avoiding further decline and trying to build back and maintain what is in alignment. And being in a vehicle is definitely a postural challenge. And I've devoted a lot of my time with chair based and adaptive yoga, but
Mm-hmm.
especially in the car. And the car is as a driving meditation, just in terms of where are my hands, where are my feet, where's my head, am I breathing, what am I thinking? Someone almost cut me off with a giant truck today. All I did was brake and not honk because that only would make me something else. And I knew he was going to cut me off anyway, so what difference does it make? And he knew he cut me off, but that's just the way it goes. And then
Well,
back
you're
to whatever it was.
you're helping me remember one of the people who came into one of our studies, a veteran who had tremendous road rage and anger from his PTS. And he said he realized the practice was working one day when he was cut off on the highway by a vehicle, and his whole mind was wanting to go into that rage response. And he found his hands were turning his vehicle in the opposite direction, and something within him was remembering this state of peace. He said that's when he knew the practice was working, because his old way of thinking, which was to go into the rage and follow the person into the car and pull him out and beat him up. He said he was going in a whole new direction, and he was in a way shocked and delighted that the meditation wasn't something now he was having to think about in the moment. It was actually helping him.
Gosh, yes. And that was very evident, right? It wasn't a guess, it was a real event.
It was a real event, and he really did feel that switch over from he's doing the practice to now the practice is beginning to do him and
Hmm,
serve him.
lovely. Well, and another step towards doing the practice, we're going to move to our next pearl, which is another element of practice. Thank you, Amnon.
We all carry within us an innate sense of unbreakable, indestructible well-being that can never be hurt, has never been harmed, and gives us the feeling of something within us that is always okay, doesn't need to be fixed or changed or altered. Meditation opens us to the somatic, deeply felt experience of this unchanging, unbreakable well-being, a quality of peace or equanimity that no matter our circumstances, no matter how unsafe the world may feel around us or has felt around us, we have this recapture, we might say, of this unbreakable, unchanging, always the same, deep inner pool or refuge of security, well-being, safety, peace, no matter our circumstances. This is really the essence that meditation brings to us as we awaken to and embrace and embody this that has always been here waiting to be discovered.
Well, that brings home what we were just touching on.
We all carry.
You to reach out to Richard here at 919-518-9773, Computers 2K Voice on Skype, logging in the chat box. We also would like to show pictures of the books that he was referring to. Just as a reference, this is an earlier book about PTSD, and he'll explain that a little bit more once again, and also about the Yoga Nidra book. Could you flash that one up too? Do we have that one? No, just the PTSD? Okay, well, could you explain a little bit more about what's in the PTSD book and what one might expect to derive from that?
Yeah. Well, I was pleasantly surprised and quite moved when in 2004, Walter Reed Army Medical Center approached me to study my program with wounded warriors coming back from the war front with post-traumatic stress disorder. And the study was so successful, it led to them implementing my program of meditation into Walter Reed Army Medical Center, where any wounded warrior could gain access to the healing virtues of this program while they were healing through their war wounds. Subsequently, it was picked up by many VAs. We're now in over 85 VA sites across the country, as well as coming into Australia, England, and Canada. The book I was asked to write as a simple introduction to the principles. So the book actually contains an orientation to what is PTSD, how can we heal it, this unbreakable sense of being within us. And then I embedded into the book 42 scripts that people can either read to themselves, have a friend read to them, and I recorded them on MP3 downloads, so they're available on our website, irest.us, so they can download them onto their phone or their computer and listen to these incremental recordings that help them learn the program. Interestingly, now we just have engaged a study with elders where we're using the same 42 meditations to help elders with, say, chronic pain, depression, anxiety as they grow older. And we've studied it with soldiers with chronic pain. We've helped people who are going through cancer treatments with long-term illnesses like multiple sclerosis. And we've actually used the program with children as young as 3 years of age and all the way into hospice, helping people who are in the dying process. So the book is really a gateway, again, to learn the practices that we can take into our life for our lifetime. And I tried to write it in a very simple, easy to understand language, and many people have said that the book is very accessible. I could have named the book The IREST Practice for Resiliency and Well-Being rather than PTSD, because it's really helping us restore and engage this sense of unbreakable resiliency and well-being and restore it into our consciousness. But because there's so much stress these days, I've called the book the IREST Program for Healing PTSD, but it's really about regaining this sense of unbreakable well-being and engaging exercises to help us sleep better if we have pain in our body, depression, anxiety, to help us overcome these kinds of issues.
Yes, because we all have something that we're processing. We're looking at folks that we would call in an extreme state or a compromised state. However, the day-to-day life has opportunities to enhance our state.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a down market to have gains. Every market called a human could have upside potential, and that's what this element is. I was
Yeah,
also,
and
yes,
as
I'm
you
sorry.
say, we're all struggling at some level with just being basic human being and in our social relationships, the stresses at work and home life, children, relationship. Relationship is often called our deepest spiritual work that we can ever do in our life, the most challenging. So these are really wonderful exercises to learn how to navigate every circumstance we're going to feel both in our own body and coming at us through the stresses of life.
Yes. So
You know,
this is
you know
part
I,
of the
I think in
toolbox.
that way, meditation in a way is the manual that none of us received when we were born. It's the manual that's going to help us learn how to do life.
Right. It's 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 our own book of Brian. It's yes, it's a
Yes.
um, uh, we have the opportunity now to take a little divergence into some fun things that are going on in Raleigh. Uh, you call this yoga, has a mission to help the physically challenged and underserved improve their life with yoga. We have a focused program called Yoga Fest Raleigh, where we're raising funds for programs in Southeast Raleigh for adults, teens, and youth. Let's show our little sponsor spot for Yoga Fest Raleigh and also flow into what's happening at one of our partners where Yoga Fest will be this week. You Call This Yoga presents Yoga Fest Raleigh. Join us each Saturday in June for morning yoga classes in cool and fun locations. Vendors and activities may be on site too. Here is Neomon Deli and Catering in West Raleigh, our location on June 24. Yoga Fest Raleigh supports free yoga in Southeast Raleigh at Chavis Park, Raleigh Teen Club, Brentwood Boys and Girls Club, and the Alliance Medical Ministry. Learn more and register today at etouches.com/YFRAL2017. Improve balance with yoga. All right. Well, you saw Lorraine there balancing on the pole. She was at the Well Fed Garden last week where we had Alicia sharing a gong bath at the end of the experience. What a lovely, exciting way to have relaxation. I had the experience of the gong bath too, and I would say that it was hard to have other chatter, even if one tried. It was luscious. Then we're going to shift back to Neomond, another dear partner, this coming week, and you saw the parking lot. But let's go inside and see what we might be tasting this Saturday after our yoga experience. We're at Neomon, ready to try the sun-dried tomato and basil hummus, freshly made, and I've got a hot, steamy pita here, fresh out of the oven. So just gonna tear some up. Whoa, look at that steam. Tear some open with Betty Solly here, chef de cuisine, and let you know, I'm dying, it's so delicious. I'm just gonna dip and dip. See you soon at Neomon with yoga on June 24th. That fella just can't help himself. What can I say? Amnon and I have been able to find the cover of Richard's Yoga Nidra book, which I'd like to show. So let's just share that a little bit. And Richard, if you'll come and share a little bit about the level 1 teacher training, which this is part of the required reading.
The teacher training is we have a level 1 and a level 2 and a certification process. It's an in-depth immersion over 5 days where we're taking a person through the different approaches of meditation. We have a 10-step approach. Has to do about really learning to set your intention in life, how to carry through so you can actualize this deep, unbreakable sense of being and manifest it in all different ways that you live your life. But the training is also learning how to work with your and befriend your emotions, your thoughts, and access a quality of joy within ourselves, again, that's unbreakable, very different from the joy we get from eating pasta sauce with beautiful bread or um, getting a new car. It's a different quality of joy that I would say is a deep peace. And so the level one is a really deep dive in both integrating meditation into our life, but then also learning how to teach it to others. And I like to tell people that we're always in a teaching situation, whether we're with a friend, a spouse, a child, at work. We're always with another. So the training is helping us learn how to be basically a good human being in all of our situations we're going to find ourselves in. But for those who want to go out and teach, we're showing people how to work with groups, how to work with individuals, just in general groups, but we're also looking at how can you bring this to what we call special interest groups, like people who are in hospitals. We do a lot of work, say, with children who are challenged with ADHD or autism. We're showcasing how to work with PTSD with veterans or people who've just been in a car crash or an illness. So we're showing how to work with what we might call the normal everyday person, but also how to work in challenging situations with people who've had difficulties in their life and wanting to heal. The level one moves into level two, which again is an upgrade, we might say, where people are learning how to teach meditation, becoming free of the scripts that we give them in level one. And we do have a certification program where people are hooked into a mentor, a supervisor who listens to their teaching so that they can really become skillful guides for others. But basically in the level 1, 2, and certification, we're teaching people how to be comfortable in their own skin with themselves, moment to moment, and then their ability to convey that comfort, that level of skillfulness with the people around them, whether they're in a teaching situation or just at home talking to their spouse or their child or at work with a peer. Because we're all needing these kinds of skills. We just never received the owner's manual. And meditation for me, again, is the owner's manual. And level one is our way of showcasing some of these beautiful tools that we could put in a tool belt. I call it the tool belt for life, that we can take out whenever we're in a challenging situation or where we're wanting to just sit for a moment and dip into that deep sense of peace and well-being and then take it back out into our daily life.
Well, now that I'm in my 60s and I can reflect more and see some of the experiences of life, and I had the fortune of exposure to transcendental meditation in college when it was groovy, but still pretty foreign, but it was a tool. And I didn't necessarily use that perpetually throughout the next 40 years. And I can reflect on how I've definitely made choices that weren't the optimal choices many a time. And my ability to reflect or pause or marinate on and be with some things was limited. And that's what I call errors or experiences that hopefully we learn from and not have insanity and repeat these things over and over.
One of the principles that we're teaching in level one is what we call welcoming, how to meet each moment gracefully, welcome it in as a messenger that's going to help us quicken on our way, learn how to respond. And as you say, sometimes we make choices that aren't optimal, but I feel within each of us we have an innate gyroscope and compass that helps us discern when we're kind of going off course and helps us come back on course. And the tools of meditation are the ways that we're enabling both to hear the inner voice or feeling tone that's saying, hey, we're going away, and have the tool to come back. I think these are really critical tools. I wish were in the hands of everyone. the element we're trying to showcase are the underlying elements that all, we might say, contemplative practices from the Judeo-Christian perspective to yoga to Buddhism to Islam to Sufi. So we're really trying to show the basic core principles that are independent of a culture, a particular religion. And what I've been delighted is when people come into our programs, they say that it's actually enhancing their own spiritual values, their own religious background, and really helping them understand both themselves and how to respond in the world, but also to better understand their own tradition, their own lineage, the culture that they come from. So these are tools that aren't going to take someone away from their own spiritual background or religious. That's actually going to enhance their values that they already possess, just giving them, we might say, an upgrade of secular tools to help them really understand themselves and their cultural, religious background that they already come from.
Yes, if they're willing to handle them, yes, and touch them and just play with them in some form without quickly judging them.
Well, I think what you're saying is we got to get in the car, take it for a drive, kick the tires, see that it actually works. We can stay at home and listen and read all we want, but at some point we got to jump in the vehicle, take it for a drive, and actually see, hey, this really works. I want to buy this one.
Yeah, more than just talk.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to the third pearl because we're building our toolkit of meditative perspectives.
We're all born with 7 senses. 6, tasting, smelling, hearing, seeing, and feeling. And this 6th sense of the thinking mind with its interesting structure of the ego I, which along with the 5 senses creates a sense of separation where we see separate objects around us and can have social relationships. But we also have a 7th sense inherent within us at birth, but which goes into the background usually around 18 months of age when the sense of self comes fully online. So what's important about the 7th sense? With all 7 senses functioning, which is what meditation awakens us to, with this 7th sense online, we can perceive separate objects, separate others, we can celebrate difference, but there's no way we can do war because it no longer makes sense to go to war when everything around us that we see is actually an aspect of ourselves. So with the awakening of the 7th sense, I would say it brings the peace that passeth all understanding, a deep sense of equanimity and well-being, and it brings an end to war.
Well, I'm going to ask for a little more narrative about that. And also, from that, if it weaves in a reasonable segue about non-duality that I read on the website. So if we could explain the 7th sense a bit more with a segue to non-duality.
Yeah, when we're born, we have this innate sense of connectedness. We don't even think about it. We're just connected. The 6 senses, the 5 senses in the mind, create a sense of separate objects, sense of separate self, so we can navigate social relationships. This 7th sense that we're born with tends to go into the background as we become more and more embedded in our sense of separation. But meditation reawakens it, brings it to the forefront, and weaves it into the other 6 senses. The 7th sense doesn't know separation. We sense something about the other, or the tree in front of us, or the rock, an underlying essence that really connects us all. And when we feel that deep of sense of connectedness, it's impossible to do violence because we realize the other is actually an inherent aspect of ourself. There's an underlying essence. So we can celebrate difference, but it brings conflict in a way that leads to violence no longer makes sense to us. At a very deep core feeling level. And so we begin to see our reactive tendencies that move us towards defensiveness and reaction in our relationships. And as we begin to see those, they quiet down and we begin to feel more authentic responses that help us stay connected to ourselves and the world around us. This is a more intellectual view. Meditation actually helps us to feel that. And what I like to do is give people experiences as quickly as possible to help them feel the immediacy of that, so they feel it as a very tangible core practice. And then I lead them into, we might say, real life circumstances, which challenges their ability to keep feeling that in the midst of more and more challenging circumstances. And this is, I think, why we've been so successful with people with anxiety disorders or depression, or just a sense that something has broken in their life. It helps them restore this seventh sense, a deep connection to themselves and to the world around them, no matter the circumstances. So I guess an easier way of saying the seventh sense, it keeps us connected to ourselves, keeps us connected to the world around us, when the world around us can feel like it's really challenging us and on all of our fronts. We keep a sense of peace and well-being, and we might say right-mindedness as we go about our life.
And would you clarify a tad more about when you cite lead them, how is that fostered? Because I don't think it's physically taking them by the literal hand.
No, but we might say by the literal meditative hand. I help a person, like for instance, if the listeners could do this simple exercise, which is feel your left and right hands at the same time and bring them into sensation. As we feel left and right hands as sensation, the thinking mind begins to quiet down, and we're actually beginning to step into this sense of well-being. Very simple exercises. So I teach things like sensing the hands, sensing the jaw, what's the tension we might be carrying in the jaw in the moment, the shoulders. By just beginning to tune into the sensation in the body, we open a gateway into this present-centered, we might say, network in our nervous system that helps restore and bring foreground this seventh sense. So we teach very simple ways, breathing. We try to showcase how to bring it into movement as we're walking or moving about, or through yoga, side bending or twisting, because isn't life going to twist and bend us in all different directions? So we want to show people you can keep a sense of peace, whether you're bending backwards, you're being twisted around by life. Very simple practices that we build on sequentially into more and more complex practices, but we have to start very simple. So just sensing the two hands, sensing the jaw, and doing that while we're in a challenging situation can help us remain centered, and we might say keep our inner compass and our gyroscope within our scope of understanding. So as we begin to feel we're going off center, off kilter, something within us is helping us stay righted and in the direction we need to be going.
Mm-hmm. I can appreciate you utilizing that under some stressful situation. So yes, thank you on that. And can you speak a bit about non-duality in that concept?
Well, non-dual means not two. It doesn't mean one. The word comes from a Sanskrit word advaita, and means not, and vaita means two. So not two, meaning when we look out at a so-called separate object, there's something about it inherent within us that is similar to what's inherent in ourselves. So we're actually looking at something that's not separate from ourselves, and the process of meditation reawakens that ability to perceive not separate in the person in front of us or the object, whether it's a mountain, a car, a tree. So it helps us keep a sense of balance and connectedness with life, life tends to be stressful, and stress can disconnect us from life and ourselves. The practices of meditation are helping us stay grounded in ourselves. So we might call them practices of non-duality, where we're reawakening that seventh sense that doesn't know separation, even in the midst of knowing or sensing separation through our six senses. And it's beautiful because MRI research studies, quantum physics, they're all revealing what the yogis have known for centuries. There is this quality of non-separation where we can tweak an atom in Paris and its neighbor in New York tweaks simultaneously. They're related. There's a sense of entanglement within everybody and everything. Yoga, meditation in general, and the practices we're teaching are helping people feel that connectedness, that entanglement with everything around them, so that they really can keep a sense of harmony and balance, again, no matter the challenging circumstances. And what we're trying to showcase in our trainings and workshops and immersions are very simple tools that help us get in touch and then be able to maintain and restore that sense of balance as we go through life for the rest of our life.
And as you're sharing that, and I'm floating along with it in agreement. I was reflecting on the book The Tipping Point.
Yes.
And this is a way of modulating where our tipping points are. That could be adverse tipping points. Tipping points could also be tipping points of action that could be very constructive. But sometimes that referral can also be, I've reached that edge where I'm going past something, and is it really necessary to go past something, or can we employ some tools along the way to just give a little ease in the other direction?
I love how in the meditation teachings that I've been taught, there is no word for right or wrong. The word actually in Sanskrit means something that's taking me away or off course, and something that is restoring me to my center and to stay on course. So we might say something that's wrong or bad is actually something that's taking us away, and something that's good and right is something that's keeping us on course. And meditation, yoga in general, helps restore our sense of being in touch with that inner gyroscope, that inner compass that helps us really stay on course and feel when we're starting to go off course, and have the tools that can help us, one, come back on course and stay on course no matter what life is bringing to our table, whether it's pain, difficulty, grief, sadness, unhappiness. And nobody gets out of life alive. At least the body doesn't get out alive. And I haven't met anybody whose body hasn't gotten out of life. So we're needing to learn these tools that can really help us navigate both life and eventually the dying process. And that's what meditation does.
Yes. Thank you for bringing it to such a nice coda in that commentary. And viewers and listeners, as we had Nishala Devi on last week, who was also talking about negotiating chronic illnesses and end-of-life processes, and the grace in managing some of those modalities too. So we've been very fortunate to have some very experienced and insightful guests on the last 2 weeks. And we thank Richard for making the time early in his day for us. I'd like to talk a little bit about next week's show, because we're going in a slightly but not greatly deviant direction, and we're bringing one of our organizational members, Lydia Ortega, on, who is a young adult, became a yoga teacher in the last couple years, and has been a very service-minded individual. And that's where we have been able to partner with Lydia and to gain her perspectives in the community as an active person on the ground, and also someone participating in our organization as well as others. So please tune in next week. Also mentioning that on July 4th, we will not be having a show. So please tune in to Richard's website, our website, and any of our guests' prior shows on the Nissan Communication channel. Oh, Lorraine is back on. She'll be on this Saturday at Neomon. No, she's not on the menu, but we're having better balance with yoga. So thanks to Richard in Marin County. And Richard, any other thoughts or directions you'd like to share with our viewers and listeners?
I think this one simple point, we all have within us a sense of peace and equanimity and balance, and it's just waiting to come forward round. And the practices of meditation can be very simple, easy to integrate into our daily life, and I hope everybody will take advantage, whether it's through our teachings at irest.us or any other meditative teachings. It's a skill and a piece that should be on all of our menus that we eat and taste and imbibe every day, and I hope every moment for the rest of our lives. So thank you, Howie, for having me on today and helping me showcase these beautiful teachings that we can integrate into our life.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and I hope that our viewers and listeners can reflect on this wonderful seminar that we've been able to engage in. I get to learn every week, and this has been joyful for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Namaste, everybody. See you next week at 10 Eastern.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.